Hey boy, you are man. Your voice is so masculine. I suggest you to have a surgery to change your voice. Boy, male, 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 he, him. You born as a male, you are living as a male, you will die as a male. So, I've had some correspondence this week.
That is, wow.
I wouldn't call it coherent.
No, yeah, coherent's not the word I would use.
No.
Honestly, I'm impressed.
Obviously, it's very hinged, incredibly hinged, and normal, the messages I've been getting.
It's like weirdly frothing, right?
Yeah.
Here's the thing, if someone had done that with speech to text, they dictated it, I could imagine someone saying that in an angry, an angry tirade.
That lad.
Sitting to type it down feels weird.
Okay, why isn't Jonathan taking dictation from gamers for comments?
It is it throws into sharp relief the reason why we have videos like that one that's been doing the rounds of that YouTuber who is just screaming about pronouns being in Starfield.
Oh, the your California bullshit because California invented the idea of pronouns.
Yeah,
and may I note the name of the company is Bethesda. You know why it's named Bethesda? Because it's named after the city it was founded in, Bethesda, Maryland. You fuckwit.
Yeah, well, I mean that requires knowing things. Just a basic grasp of historical context, which, you know what? Not everyone needs that. But if you're going to make it your job, it would behoove you to know about what you're talking about. But then again, that doesn't seem to be a qualification for people that go online and start talking about trans people. Hello, everyone, by the way. My name is Stephanie Sterling. You might know me from a Starfield review that was several thousand words long, but had one sentence in it mentioning that Bethesda and ZeniMax mistreated a trans employee. This has been an obsession for quite a few people online the past few days. This is the most harassed I've ever been over a review. I include Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, No Man's Sky, game reviews that have had my site DDoS'd, just the sustained amount, and the way people are going out of their way to get to me. Because the one place where I have DMs accessible, I mean, they're filtered, but you can send a DM, unlike on Twitter, is my Instagram. Mostly because on most days, if I get a message from a random, it's going to be someone saying I've got nice tits. And of course, I'm going to welcome that. It will be nice tits or, hey, just asking out of interest, are you ever going to do an OnlyFans? I wouldn't make zero money. That confirmed, judging by the messages. But people are going out of their way to find any way they can get my attention. And when they do, it's that. It is spunking word salad in my face. And bizarre stuff. Of all the things to go after, my allegedly masculine voice, which I've been speaking on Podquisition and Jimquisition for a couple of weeks with a bit of a higher register. I'm dabbling in voice training stuff. Not necessarily because I feel a need to, but because I would like to.
You are a performer.
Well, yeah. But at my most masculine, my voice could not be described as masculine. If I drop what I'm doing, that's it. This is as manly as it gets. And it's still kind of... my voice never broke. I got made fun of at school for that. It never properly broke. It got a bit deeper, but it didn't break and go deep, like it does with other people. Because, I mean, I used to talk on recordings we did 10 years ago, Conrad, where I would talk about what I called at the time, my fucked up hormones. I do suspect I'm some degree of intersex, just because of certain things.
It's not just, my Brit phobia speaking when I say that, no, you do not sound very masculine. And never
I did have someone say they thought all British people spoke like that. But yeah, it's, of all the things, like, I've pointed this out before, and people pointed it out in response to this, because obviously I've been making fun of it everywhere. Before I transitioned, my manliness was always called into question. You know, I was made fun of for being feminine and effete and...
This is the universal trans femme experience.
Yeah.
It's the, you're not masculine enough, you're too feminine. Oh, wait, you want to be perceived that way? Man.
Yep, nothing convinced them of my masculinity more than my femininity, ultimately. I'll read one more, just because it's the one I've got up. All caps. Hey him, you're a man. When archaeologists find you, they'll find a man, dude. And this has just been the level of what I'm getting.
It's like a playground taunt. Like, there's just nothing there.
Starfield has been, like, it's really brought out some wild takes over nothing.
It's been fascinating.
My one that I've been getting some stuff my way for is, I dared to point out, and this was when Shouty Man who's angry about pronouns was doing the rounds, I pointed out, he didn't even have to look at the pronoun selection, because this game does a not necessarily great thing of, you know, it doesn't say gender selection, it does body type A, body type B, it tries to be ungendered, but based on the body type you pick, it will assume your pronouns. And the point I'm making there is, he picked masculine body type and was presented he, him, and did not have to see they, them, or she, her. You know, those would have required clicking on a box. It just, it assumed what he wanted, and it was the thing that he wanted, and he still got upset. And there's people who were going, well, there shouldn't have been an option to change it. If you picked the male body, it should have been he, him. There shouldn't have been a question mark whether it was he, him. And I'm like,
these walking vomitoriums are so offended by pronouns. They don't even think they have them. You see them online saying they don't have pronouns and they don't agree with pronouns.
Yeah.
Like they're that like unhinged.
Yeah, if you called a cis man he, him, you know, that's not pronouns, that's just what he's called. It's only pronouns if a trans person has them.
Yeah, it's been wild. Because you get these people furious at Starfield for having pronouns, then furious at other people for criticizing the pronouns in the wrong way, as you did with the presentation of them, not the existence of them.
Yeah.
And of course, me being really under the fire by these people who... Like, one thing I've realised with these people is the way they're typing, they're frustrating themselves because they're that desperate to be insulting, and it's not satisfying them. I think that's what it is. They are trying to nail the perfect insult, but they only have, like, 5 that they repeat. So they start going in all caps and repeating them, giving this impression that they're screaming, because I think that's what their minds are doing. I think they are internally screaming because they can't get the venom out, because they don't have the language for it. They don't have the language, so they just repeat the minuscule vocabulary that they have, that they've built around their hatred. But you get these people, they've got the fucking temerity to say that they're not transphobic, but optional pronouns that they don't even have to say is too much for them. And there is no way you can describe that as anything other than hatred. You can't say, oh, I've got no problem with trans people, I just don't want it shoved down my throat, as they always love to say. And there it is, not shoved. They have to open their mouths and swallow it. And as I said in a video a few weeks ago, you can tell a lot about a throat by what it won't swallow. And that's what we're seeing. This is such a huge self-report, ultimately. But that's been my week. Other than that, other than a stoving headache that like lasted several days and just being a bit poorly. But I have sort of bounced back today. How is everyone else? How are y'all doing?
I've had a busy week working on a bunch of stuff that is happening in the background. I'm very tired from a lot of ongoing background projects. How about you?
I got a direct message from someone who asked me, do you regret giving Dark Souls a 7?
Oh my god, I love the ones that don't let go. Like a decade or more later and they're still on it. Do you, Conrad? Do you regret it?
No. Like, why?
Even though it's popular. Like, that's what they mean.
Why would I regret that? Like, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
You gave the lowest score possible to a game that sold over 1 million copies.
So I'm objectively wrong. Is that...
Apparently.
Okay.
Yeah. The universe has decided you are wrong. Regret your words and deeds.
Yeah,
I mean, that's not even living rent-free in their heads. Like, when they're talking about reviews that are, like, over 10 years old, you've, like, inherited the house. You're not living there rent-free. You own it at that point. You own that person, Conrad. They're yours.
What's so... and I replied with nope, and they said fair enough, and we moved on, and I don't know if we'll hear about this in another Techade or not. It was... It was odd, though, because I don't get this, because I am a, cishet white guy, basically, I'm assuming. I used to get a lot
of shit when people thought I was, but then again, I am...
You also have much more outward and controversial, opinions sometimes, and you have a big platform for it, so you're always going to attract it.
Yeah. But no, I know what you mean. Yeah, you certainly don't get the level of viciousness, because I never used to get it that vicious. Yeah. And I never used to get told I'm too rude in my reviews or I'm screeching.
That was the selling point.
Yeah, it always was.
Yeah. Fun fact, do you remember when this podcast started, I used to get messages from people telling me, on a show that I was on with you, Steph, that I was too loud and I swore too much and I was too rude.
Yeah. I always knew, of course, because, I see trans people and women, and anyone sort of presenting femme online, and I see the messages they get. But it wasn't until I got to experience both sides of it, being accepted as a cishet man, and then being seen as femme, to whatever degree these people want to see it, the change in the way people perceive me is startling. The moment I came out, there were threads on places like NeoGAF that were like, oh, I think Jim Sterling's having a mental breakdown. Like, the amount of sentiments online that I've gone mad, and that it's reflected in my content, which hasn't changed. Yeah. Like, now I'm angry, now I'm rude, now I'm mental. And the thing is, I was mentally ill before I transitioned.
Yeah, but it was nothing to do with the transition.
Yeah,
the thing.
like, I've got the same suite of mental illness diagnoses. I'm just, less suicidal. So I'm a bit less mental, than I was. Whatever.
Yeah. Well, welcome to Podquisition. This is a video game podcast.
Yeah, Starfield shit. Yeah, I'm not going to, do a sort of Games of the Week talk about Starfield, but as has happened somewhat frequently on this show, where I've had early impressions, then played more, and come back the next week, we had that with Starfield, where last week I was certainly lukewarm. Was not impressed. I was at the point where, 5.5 score-wise, wouldn't have been surprised. Obviously lower than that in the review, and very merciless towards the game. The more I played it, the more offended I got. It's another one of these games, like Redfall, that really put paid to that belief that a negative review will turn positive, thanks to sorcery, if you play more of the game. Oh, you didn't finish the game, etc. The more I played of Starfield, the more disgusted I was by its lack of imagination. And that's what it keeps coming back to me, aside from all the glitches, aside from how dated it is in many ways, how small it is. Yeah, it's got, 1 million planets, thousands of planets. Most of them have the same spaceport with the same cave network in it. I don't know, has your opinion changed, Laura?
No, I tried to play more, in my opinion, very solidly sits at I have too many accessibility barriers to enjoy the moment to moment, and that is going to be a barrier that will prevent me ever getting into this game enough to really see why people love it.
That speaks perfectly to my issue of the lack of imagination and the rote repetition that Starfield is compared to Fallout and Skyrim. So lacking in imagination that, to them, accessibility really is the difference between toggling or holding the trigger for iron sights. Yeah. That's it. The stuff that's existed for a decade.
I know a lot of people who are very into the loop of it, but I know that, you know, this is the kind of game I could get into in the right settings, but I just can't get that rhythm of playing going enough to stick with it. I have not seen very much of it, and I never will.
Yeah. And honestly, what you've seen is enough. It doesn't really change.
Yeah.
It's the same quests where, you know, I understand coming off the back of Baldur's Gate 3. Like, that is a fucking tough act to follow for anything. But when you're playing a game where the quests feel natural and embedded in the world, and one adventure leads you to the next, and then you get Starfield, which is just a list of fetch quests that send you to one place, then send you right back to meet all of these NPCs who meet you and immediately trust you with their life stories and secrets because, as I pointed out, like, they know you're the protagonist. It's the only reason.
No, you are correct. Like, I did do another session because I was getting some footage for a video, and, like, even, like, really early on, one of the very first, like, plot quests they send you to is, hey, there's these magic artifacts that you're trying to collect for the big space organization. Let's go talk to this person we've heard has one. And you meet him after, like, shooting a couple of enemies, and he's like, oh, that thing, didn't even know what it was. Sure, you can have my apparently important space relic. Goodbye. Like, there's like zero attempt for him to be like, can I have something for it? Or, like, you know, it was just like, yeah, no, take my one-of-a-kind space artifact. You did shoot, like, 2 people.
I mean, the game even kicks off with this. Hello, stranger. You're the protagonist. Do you want my spaceship?
Yes!
Sure, leave me stranded on this shithole of a planet. Just take my spaceship. I trust you. Because, again, they can't think their way around this. They just want to take you from fetch quest to fetch quest. It might not have bored the pants off everyone else. Like, they might still have all the excitement in the world for this shit. But Starfield, for me, hammers so deeply the same RPG tropes I've seen for decades, plural. Like the one I complained about in the review of the disrespected protagonist. The fact that developers these days still think it's funny to have every guard in a city mutter shit about you as you walk past them. Like, I deal with that in real life. I don't need it in a game. Especially a game where you can't, like, answer back to them. You're the heavily armed badass who is saving the lives of these shitty citizens constantly. And everyone who sees you just, I've got nothing to say to you. You look stupid.
I know you're describing Starfield, but for a split second I was like, wait, are you talking about Final Fantasy 16? Did I miss a switch in the conversation?
I'm fucking done with it. I am done with inhabiting worlds that are just so hostile to you. Seemingly because the developers still think it's funny. And I've never laughed at some random fucking nobody talking to me like I'm a piece of shit when it's so visually obvious that I could tear their fucking face off. I reached such a level of hostility in one area of Starfield where there was a line of guards and it was like taking a walk of shame as you walk past all of them, and every single one has something shitty and snide to say. And I'm fucking over it. Just over it.
That's fair. What you been up to this week, Conrad? You been playing anything?
Well, I'm playing Stardew Valley again.
Yeah.
I haven't played in... Well, I think I started a game last year, maybe, played one day, and then never bothered to load the save again. But my wife Linda's been playing a lot of games lately, and had asked about it, and I had realized that I knew they put co-op in there. I didn't realize it was local.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's fun in local co-op. Yeah, I like it. I think it's interesting how they implemented it. Because it's sort of like Borderlands. Which sounds like a strange comparison, but you remember when you would play Borderlands in multiplayer, but all of your quest lines were like independent of each other, and so you could come wandering into a game, where you didn't have a completed quest. This like creates a sub-save within their main game save that has its entire own quest line. And like all of the functions and everything just completely independent, just embedded in that game that you're loading in when you join the co-op game.
Interesting.
It is. And that has some pluses and minuses. Like, it means that you can get all of the rewards for a lot of these things multiple times. Which that can be useful in the early game and things like that. You can accomplish twice the labor, in a given time. Not a huge issue in the early phases of Stardew Valley, but still, helpful. But you share finances. The finances are all tied to the farm itself. And you don't share equipment. Like, you get the full starting set of equipment, and you acquire the other bits of equipment in the same ways that you would get it in a single-player game as the co-op player. You just have your own independently running, like, cutscene thing that you have to go through. And the other player isn't interrupted at all, but what's also not interrupted is the timer. So you could lose half a day on some of these cutscenes while the other player or players are running around doing stuff. It's interesting. I don't hate it. Oh, well, then the other side of that too is because you can do all this labor. If the single player comes back and decides to just play on their own for a few days, which you can do, you're not, required to have anybody else there. You've just possibly created a ton of additional maintenance work for them to do on crops. That's kind of funny. One, if you load in multiple days later, like, it feels like it's built with the intent that everyone is going to start together and be there for all the sessions, but while providing the option for them not to be. Because if I come back in summer now, having missed half of spring because she was playing it on her own, there are things that I won't be able to accomplish in terms of spring quests and goals that I'll have to wait until next year to do and hope that I'm there when she's playing. It's neat. The like complexities of running these in sort of parallel, because that's really what it feels like it's doing. It's odd in a game like this. Like, and I have all my own relationships with characters. We're both pursuing the same person. It will wind up being some weird poly thing, I'm sure. But, yeah. Neat game. Interesting implementation of co-op. Really enjoyed that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Steph, shall we talk about the thing we've both been playing this week?
Yeah. Now, you and I were like really bitching about this game last night as I was playing it. We were messaging. My estimation of it has gone up since. However, the criticisms remain. We are talking about Lies of P. The first game I've had a proper review copy of in years.
Yeah. The other week, I saw a post about review code. I was like, We can get you in on that, Steph. We'll get you
Yeah, it turned out they were fans of mine over there, so that helped. So yeah, the review may very well be up before this podcast is up. So my thoughts will be known. So Laura, if you'd like to sort of take point.
Yeah, so this is that. We talked about the demo for it that was put up a little while back. It's that sort of Pinocchio, Bloodborne, Dark Souls-y game. I have not had as much time to put into this as I would ideally like. I've had other work stuff going on this week, but I will say, I think that the dodge was one of the big complaints around that demo, and the dodge definitely does feel a bit nicer now. I want to like this game a lot, and 90% of the time I really like it. Like, maybe even more than that. Like, most of the time I'm playing this, I think that it does a really good job of, like, environmental design and tone setting and building its whole little world as a place that I want to dig into. Everything set up here is a little bit forced, but in a way that's kind of endearing. Like, the first time you realise that the whole deal is, puppets have essentially, like, Asimov's laws of robotics, and one of them is that they can't lie, but you're Pinocchio, the one that can lie.
You're not Pinocchio. This is the bit I find charming.
You're not Pinocchio. Yeah.
Yeah, I find some of the tenuous links make me cringe a bit. Like, Jiminy Cricket.
Sorry, no, not Jiminy, Gemini.
That's the thing,
Gemini.
That's the tenuous thing. He's called Gemini, but they sort of awkwardly try and pronounce it Jiminy. That makes me cringe. But the one thing I find truly charming about all these tenuous links is for a game with such a deliciously stupid concept as What If Pinocchio but Bloodborne, the one thing that they thought might be a bit ridiculous is that Pinocchio be called Pinocchio. They're like, that might stretch credibility, let's call him P.
I'm still gonna call him Pinocchio because he's the puppet boy that can tell lies. He's Pinocchio. Although I will say, my favourite thing about him just being called P is when you start unlocking the ability to activate your P organs.
Yes! I love the P organ.
Strengthen your P organ, Steph. Strengthen your P organ. I love, like, all of the stuff this game is doing with its, like, design elements. Fun fact, don't know if you've heard this, Steph. You know how, like, in the early game, like, the first, like, handful of bosses and mini-bosses are all just Robocops?
Yeah.
This game was originally going to have an ACAB quest line that got pulled because the developers cowered it out and thought it would be too controversial.
Oh, mate.
They were going to have APAB, all puppets are bastards. And they took it out.
That is... Like, there's enough plausible deniability there as well.
Right.
They could have been like, we're not saying cops. We're saying puppets. They'd have got away with that.
Yeah. But,
I love it, though.
It's fucking great. So, most of the time I'm really enjoying it. It is surprisingly polished. In its best moments, it feels like up there with, a FromSoft Dark Souls in terms of, like, consistency of mechanics, when it's at its best. When it's at its
polished.
Best, it feels really good to play.
Mm.
The problem... Well, okay, I have two major problems with it. The first one, I very rarely play Dex in any, like, Soulsborne game, and I decided to play Dex in this one, and overall, this game has a problem with not offering you enough early weapon variety, and not giving you enough options early on to pick up a weapon outside of, like, the stat that you picked as your starting weapon to play around with before you have to commit to what you're doing.
I got really annoyed because I always play Dex in these games.
Yeah.
And the first few weapons are all strength or, motivity.
Yes.
Or magic, advance.
But, like, yeah, this is the point, is, as someone that very rarely plays Dex, I like the rapier that you start with. I think it's a fun weapon. But the problem is, there is a particular lack of Dex weapons for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how many hours in would you say it was when you get that that boss soul vendor that finally gives you a decent other Dex weapon?
I mean, it would have been over 5. It would have been like a regular action game's length before, and that's actually something true of the game overall. There are a lot of neat mechanics and systems that are so deep into the game as to almost feel hidden. And the boss weapons are one of them. By the time you find it, has a dex weapon. It's an A scaling. Like, I got it. Visually, it's great. Like, just a quirky concept. Its moveset is basically the rapiers.
Yes.
And then I had to play, like, a while more before I finally got a trident that was really genuinely cool. I will say, just in the game's favour, you can get those items that change the scaling of a weapon, which is a great idea. But as with the interesting weapon crafting system, it is clear these weapons were designed for their original states and intentions.
Yeah. And the thing is even if you wanted to make that kind of effort to be like, I like the moveset, but I want it to be scaling with a different stat, you would need a lot of that item to fundamentally change, like, the stat makeup of a weapon. And those items to do that sort of scaling change are just too infrequent to make that really viable. Like, they are very much designed for bump up what this weapon is already supposed to be doing. There's also a system to do with, like, taking apart weapons and putting new parts together.
Yeah. And great idea in theory.
Yeah, because, like, even with a lack of other weapons, what I could do was keep the rapier handle, which scaled with its dex. I don't know what they call it.
Technique, but it's dex.
You could put a different end on that and still have it scaled with dex and still do basically the same type of moveset, but it would have different specials, and in the case of the one that I swapped on there that was like a big electric baton, I was dealing electric damage rather than just pure brute force. And I like that you can experiment with different, like, modifier and damage types while keeping a base that has the same damage scaling. I think that's a neat idea in practice. But as you say, like, the moveset doesn't change. Or the fundamentals of the moveset, your lights and heavies don't change. And I think why that's a problem is, like, using the rapier as an example, that rapier's moveset is designed around a certain length. It is around poke, poke, poke at a specific length, and then, like, you automatically jump backwards to safety, assuming that you were attacking at rapier length. If you put something shorter on the end of that, you have to get in closer to do the attacks, and that leap backwards no longer brings you back into safe positioning.
I mean, look, I tried the rapier handle with an axe head. I gave it an honest go.
Oh, is
but
that
when
that
you're
fire
doing
axe?
the thrusting, because I liked the fire axe. For a while, but it was a bit slower than I wanted. It's why I went dex. I wanted quicker attacks. So I was like, I really like the axe, and I worked fucking hard to get it. So I'll plonk it onto the rapier. And when you're doing thrusting attacks with a range that is barely beyond your own fist, it just doesn't work. And that's a shame.
Yeah, it is not as exciting of a feature in practice as it promises to be. The other issue with this game, and I'm now hitting the point that was where you had your dip in opinion on this game, and I understand why.
Go to hell.
Yes, so there is one boss in particular that we're both thinking about, but generally so, this game has some, like, weird difficulty spikes. And they're difficulty spikes that at times can feel just a bit bullshit. They're not like, this is a difficult challenge and I feel like my failure is my own. There are some times where bosses will throw out things that just feel like there is very little I can do about them. Like, prior to this, there was one a bit further back that was a big fiery furnace boss in a room full of pillars, and it would sometimes like fill the whole floor up with fire.
Yeah, he's a gear.
Yeah, and the spike there was, if you happen to be really close when that wind-up starts, and, like, it's already destroyed all the pillars, sometimes there's nothing you can do to avoid getting fire damage over time applied to you. And there are items you can use to dispel that, but there is no vendor at that point in the game you can purchase that consumable item from. So if you have a couple of them in your pocket, and you're like, okay, well, I'll use them if I accidentally get that fire effect to myself. Nope, I used them all. Now I've got to fight you with no way to mitigate your attack that sometimes I just have no option but to get hit by. There are little moments like that where it just kind of spikes out of nowhere. And some of those moments are real frustrating and leave a negative taste on the pacing of the game.
I think what really, really makes that a pain in my ass is how hard it pushes the perfect blocking system.
We were talking about this.
Now, I said when Sekiro came out, I understand it's a good game. I can't play it because I like to dodge, I like to block, I cannot parry to save my life. Yeah. To its credit, I'll start with the good bit. To its credit, this is the first game I have ever played in my life where blocking perfectly felt doable as a first-line strategy. There's something about it where I get it here.
If you go back to when we talked about the demo of this a while back, you were unhappy with that lack of dodge, and I was saying this at the time. I was like, I don't mind that the dodge is a little iffy, because those first, 2 or 3 bosses, I was super loving that block. Like, the perfect block setup is really fun in that if you do a regular block and you, do it a little early and it's not a perfect block, it's kind of like Bloodborne in that sort of give and take of health, where you lose a bit of health temporarily, but if you stay aggressive, you can earn it back. And that paired alongside the perfect blocks, which in those first few bosses are, very clearly telegraphed, and it's like, if you fuck this up, you're going to get punished, but if you learn the timings, you are going to feel like a badass, meant that I felt, really confident just standing my ground and playing aggressive, and that was really fun.
For a while. And then we come to the bit where it undermines its own mechanic by enemies, not just bosses, but even, you get to a point where even regular enemies, I mean, hell, even the starter enemies, the little dudes with canes, have a moveset that includes an attack that winds up, then delays to try and trick you into blocking, then swings, combined with a different move that just instantly swings and hits. So you get so many enemies designed like that, to where they're deliberately throwing you off your game and trying to make you distrust the mechanic that it is emphasizing above all other defensive strategies. And it just gets on my wick.
And I think it's important to note, what we mean by saying that this game, tries to encourage you to use that block above other defensive strategies, in that bosses in particular have these attacks where they will sort of glow red as they do them. And you might get lucky and dodge them, but they are designed to be undodgeable. They are designed to be attacks that you have to perfect guard against, realistically. They are your, the area this is gonna hit is so big, you need to be, facing this head on. And I really like that mechanic until it starts going, no, fuck you. Because, it gets to a point where the safest thing to do is to dodge, and to, focus your time on learning the dodge timings rather than the block timings. But then you still have to deal with, okay, well, sometimes it's going to be that thing that can only be blocked, and you've deliberately made a bunch of, very similar wind-ups to try and go, haha, fuck you, why'd you fucking think you should block there? Fuck you for even trying.
Mm-hmm. The first time I truly noticed this, because I was still playing for a while without using the perfect block too much. Then I was like, right, I've fucking had enough of this. I went into the little training yard in the hotel, gave it an honest go, and was almost immediately like, wait a minute, no, I am getting this. Then I went to the factory, and there are those white mannequin-looking enemies that are the basic enemy there, and their moveset is almost entirely fake-outs with weird animations where they'll swing for you, stop, slow, then bang. And it's so off-putting and distracting that I hate fighting them. I hate it. And then you notice it with so many enemies. They are designed to trick you. And I get it. I get not wanting to make every attack telegraphed. But you reach a point where few of them feel properly telegraphed. And then you combine it with certain bosses like the one we're talking about, where they are sliding around the arena and confusing the camera when you lock on because they are waving about and their arms are doing the same thing as those mannequin enemies. Like, I'm going to swing at you, then slow, then fast, then slow. And it's disorienting sometimes.
I'm not opposed to a hard boss in a game like this.
No.
But there are some times in this where the difficulty feels less like it's about learning to get good enough to handle what's coming, and it's more you're just gonna have to make a guess and hope that you guessed right on which of the things is coming, and feel like an idiot for not making the right read. And it doesn't feel good.
Yeah, it doesn't.
But I don't want to sound too down on it though, because the vast majority of my time playing this game, I really enjoy it, and I think it's a very polished, very well-made game that has a really good, solid identity of its own, and it's got a really stupid sense of identity. The first time I picked up a ringing phone and listened to, like, a 3-minute monologue from a man who was threatening to tell me riddles, and his riddle turned out to be a fucking what's black and white and red all over level.
Yeah, it was the Riddle of the Sphinx is the first one. Like, the most bargain bucket,
but
riddle.
It's the fact that he spends, 3 fucking minutes, building up to it, and it's such a nothing riddle. Like, this game has a good sense of humour and sense of identity, and...
It's why I hope you do get past that boss soon, because the whole thing with the Black Rabbit Brotherhood after is so charming, and has a great boss fight, with a really cool cinematic introducing it.
I'm confident I will get through it. You gave me some advice that might help to cheese it a little, and, it's not that long until the game's out, at which point, there will be things that I can go look other people's notes up for, how do I get around this bullshit?
My general thing is, really, really abuse throwable items, because more than any other Souls-like game, throwing things is so useful. Bombs, saw blades, sharpened bits of pipe, whatever you can get your hands on, lob it.
I've never once thrown one of those in this game, and you today are the reason I'm going to go fight that boss tonight by doing that.
It really helps, especially when it's got the last few bits of health left. I got it down to where it was a couple hits, and I can do this, but if I get close, I'm gonna get murked. And I had, some saw blades and went, fuck yeah.
I've had a couple of runs like that, and I wish I'd thought of it. But so many of these games, just throwables aren't worth your time.
Mm-hmm. Some of the throwables here, scale really well. If you run Dex, the sharpened pipe is good. The Legion arms can be pretty good. My advice there is the flamethrower. Once I put a few points into magic/advance, that has been a really reliable help at times, just flambeing everything. But like you, I love a lot about this game, and my estimation has gone up as I've played more. I came to an opera house at one point, and the enemies in there are so inventive. Some of the visuals in this game are so fucking creative. The things they've done with these puppets, it's really cool.
Yeah, and just generally, I think this is one of the better Souls-like genre games in terms of really capturing that specifically Bloodborne feel of the interweaving environmental design and that sort of unlocking routes that backtrack to places you've already been, and how that world sort of flows together. I feel like this captures that nicely. There's a lot of stuff to like here. It's just a few moments where my opinion will tank for a couple of hours and then sort of have to recover.
And that's the experience. There are roadblocks here that have felt more hopeless than any other Souls I've played. One of the great things about Dark Souls for me was that no matter how hard a boss was, I knew I could beat it. I would look at it and I'd say, I understand there's a good strategy here. I am doing the damage I need to do. I've just got to outlast it, and I will do this. I genuinely came close to packing it in at the boss we're talking about, because I genuinely thought, I'm not going to do this, and I don't want to. But then what followed was some brilliant levels with some great wit and a lovely atmosphere and a really terrific boss battle afterwards.
I I will also note, and this is like, I played around a little bit with the fact that there are some... You've got a consumable item you can use to summon little NPC people to help you with boss fights.
God.
And I played around with it a little bit, and they're less than fucking useless. The balance on those, the NPC summons have so little health, they die in like 2 hits. It's not...
And they don't defend.
No,
they will not block. Yeah. They will not get out the way.
Yeah, the only way for them to be even vaguely useful is for you to play so aggressively that the boss sticks on you and you alone, because the NPC will just eat shit if the enemy targets them for even a second. They're less than useless.
This is one of those things I mentioned earlier where later on you get a system introduced that would have been so much more fucking useful earlier. Later on, much later on, the cube you get off that bloke can be used to empower the Spectre, the AI ally. And aside from the fact that the animation to use the item takes so fucking long that the Spectre may very well die before the effect pops off, I got it and I thought, my God, for the boss that was giving me a bad time, this would have been so much more useful then.
And again, that's the problem, is like, those exist to be a mechanic for, I'm having a bad time and I'm just not enjoying this boss and I just want to get through it. You shouldn't be nerfing that tool. If someone's gotten to the point of, fuck this, I'm gonna give this a go, don't go, well, you've not gotten far enough into the game for that to be vaguely helpful yet.
Like, I used it on the first boss it became available for, and it turned that fight into a joke. That first fight, for, like, the second boss, you summon the Spectre for that, and it's too easy. I was like, this was too easy. The very next boss,
right,
the Spectre just runs up and gets mullered.
That's the thing, is like, it's not that this is a conscious design decision, it feels like. It's some weird balancing.
Yeah.
They promise you, like, hey, this will be helpful, and then like, nah, fuck it, take it away.
And I don't want to say it's a deliberate point of malice. Because of the items I found later, that says to me that they very much do intend this thing to be used. That they do want that option to be there if you want it, but they've not balanced it.
It's like the whole, hey, you have no encumbrance, you've got to earn a decent encumbrance back by putting points into it. Just give me the useful version. Don't nerf it and give it back to me.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. There's just elements here that, with some tweaks, with some balancing, like rebalancing, they'd be ironed out, no problem.
Despite all the caveats I have about it, I would recommend this above a lot of Souls-like games. Yeah. You know, like, this isn't janky in the ways that, like, The Surge is janky. It's got its problems, but I think it's fundamentally, there is a good game here if you enjoy that genre and you're willing to put up with a couple of friction points.
I'm in full agreement. Like, I fear I've been negative to the point of coming across like I don't enjoy the game. I have loved much of this game. It's the kind of game that I love until I don't. I love the atmosphere, the gothic sort of look, like the puppets themselves. Like, they're not steampunk, it's more like a goth punk robotic thing. Again, like the enemies I was alluding to, there is this sort of, you go into the entertainment district and you start meeting these puppets built for entertainment, and they are just so gorgeously designed, like just beautifully designed. The environment's wonderful, the level of polish and quality. This is possibly the smoothest, like, glitch-free game in its sort of area on that sort of budget level. Like, it runs better than any of the big budget, like, super mainstream AAA games I've played this year.
Yeah, agreed.
It is so well put together.
It is a game that I'm harsh on, because the moments where I reach those friction points keep me from continuing playing a game I've been having a great time with. I'm critical of it because the points where it struggles mean that I don't get to keep seeing the creative things this game has in store. Like, I'm critical because I want this game to be better because it is so much a thing I'm enjoying.
Absolutely. Yeah. Gorgeous soundtrack as well.
Yeah.
A lot of the truly great music is hidden. There are these collectible LPs
the records,
that you can get, and you play them manually when you get to the hotel, like the hub area. And you have to keep putting them on. I wish you could put on like a random playlist. And some of those songs, like the first one you can get...
Is that the one with the sort of femme vocalist?
The one that's all, close your eyes.
Yeah.
That one. That song is fucking beautiful.
It's so not the tone I expect of that game, but it works so well.
Yeah.
It caught me off guard. Again,
speaking to like how staggered everything is, like hours and hours and hours and hours in, I got a second one. And it was also really good. And any record I've got has been just lovely. The in-game music sort of in the environments is very rare. All of it's really good. So yeah, like the audio-visual presentation, easily this game's strongest area. And it's top fucking notch. Like, when I saw the first trailer for this game, I expected a Focus Home Interactive Eurojank level kind of thing, and I like that stuff. I was blown away by a game that looks, sounds, plays on par and often better than anything by a massive big-name publisher.
Agreed. That said, my one bit of advice how you can improve your experience with this game: do at least one boss fight where you go and play the Shadow the Hedgehog original soundtrack while you're fighting a boss. It is exactly this game's, like, slightly trying too hard to be edgy tone. Yeah, that's the big one we've been playing. Conrad, you played anything else this week?
I haven't really played anything else. The only thing I've done, though, that is kind of interesting to me, I've decided to get back into painting miniatures.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because I found it to be really relaxing when I did it, and I'm not terrible at it, and it's just kind of pleasant. And I picked up a box of Warhammer figures, a set of Orc Boys, just to have something, sort of basic to play around with. And it should be noted, I guess, that I haven't painted a miniature since like 2003 or 2004, and wow, Games Workshop models have changed a lot in 20 years. They're hollow now. That's weird.
Like as the price has gone up, the cost of making them has gone down.
I don't know. Like, that's what's so weird about it, is that like they have made them more complex from a design perspective, because instead of just having it be a solid piece of plastic that's etched, now it's all of the little pit parts fit together. And, you would get a box of models 20 years ago and they would be on sprues, but you'd have, torsos and legs, arms and heads, and you could sort of mix and match all of that. This box that I picked up with 10 models in it has one model that can have a different head and a different right arm, and the rest of them are all just stock builds. And like it's so strange to me. They've made more work for themselves in making it so that they're more complex to put together, and at the same time reduced the ability for the end user to customize them. It is truly remarkable. Like, I was shocked. The plastic's even better quality, though, than it was then. Like, they're really nice. But, Jesus Christ, what have they done? It's wild. Yeah.
Every now and then I get tempted to get back into that. I bought a box of Thousand Suns last year and never opened the box.
Yeah. I won't play. I have no interest in playing whatsoever.
Oh, no.
No.
Not Warhammer specifically, but me and Jane have a lot of board games, and Jane's recently started getting into miniature painting. She's been going through some of our more miniature-heavy board games and just doing nice little paint jobs, but she's been going really elaborate. We've got a game called Scythe that's about sort of diesel punk mechs, where she's been doing like little textured grass, like 3D grass effects down at the feet of the mechs and stuff like that, and they've been turning out real nice. Yeah, it's been nice. It's been nice having some model painting going on in the house where I can be like, oh, what you been painting today?
The thing I've always like really, really wanted is to make a Betrayal at House on the Hill set with miniatures for all of the things that go in there, and I've sort of browsed around. There's someone who has made a really, really nice set of the investigators that are specific for Betrayal. That's great. Everything else I'd have to like hunt down. But then, you know, if I go that route, one, it's going to be a ton of like figures and paint, like a ton of painting and whatnot. And then I got to figure out a storage solution for all of that on top of it. And it's just, and if I'm going to do that, then it has to be some fancy box that contains everything and is all custom. And now the project has ballooned in scale to a point of absurdity. You know, we're talking hundreds of dollars for a game I never play because I don't have enough people around to play board games with. So, yeah, it's an impractical fantasy that I will, a few times a year, spend the better part of a day, like, thinking about how I would do it, and then at the end of that day realize, this is impractical. Why have you wasted this time? But anyway, I'm going to paint models again, and it's going to be fun.
Nice. The only other thing I've played, and I've not had much of a chance to play it because it came out like literally this morning before we started recording. But the first DLC for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet released this morning.
Ekans!
Ekans is in it again.
Yeah,
they put Ekans back in.
That's all I know about it.
I'm glad you know. I was streaming like the first 2 hours of it this morning, and I found it Ekans, and everyone was like, "Steph's gonna be so happy."
I mean, it just goes to show that Nintendo knows what I know. Ekans is bankable.
Ekans is bankable.
I'm not going to spend money to get it.
No.
I don't play the game anymore. But Ekans is bankable.
It's more Pokemon. It's going to keep me entertained for a while. I'll sit here going, I got more things to run around in circles until one's a different colour. But that's it for me. You played anything else, Steph?
Oh my, yes.
Yeah, what you played?
Oh my, yes.
What you played?
So, I'm going to talk about 2 games. Now, one of the games is an extra added onto the main game. But I'm going to present it as 2 games because I want the name of the game in the podcast description.
Okay.
I want to make Conrad type it because it's so good. But the game is called Night at the Gates of Hell. That's the main game. Okay. This is a game done by Puppet Combo. Now, I don't know if you've heard of Puppet Combo. They've been making a name for themselves in the horror area. I've talked about one of their games on this show. It was before I knew Puppet Combo was a thing. I forget the exact title. It was like Nun Massacre or like Killer Nun or something. This absurd, like, low poly, bad graphics, but like, it's clear it's deliberately bad. Overly filtered to look like a shitty VHS tape. You can turn the filters off, but like, they are like thickly filtered. And for the longest time, I have tried, I think, possibly every Puppet Combo game that's come out, and I have never been able to tell if they're a joke or not. Because some of them are borderline unplayable. There was one I played where you walk around in a dark house, suddenly loud, and I mean like loud metal music plays as this like killer with a chainsaw or an axe, it was one of the two, like chases you and then just chops you to bits. And that's one of the other sort of trademarks of these games. They are audio visual processing nightmares. I can't play a Puppet Combo game with Phoenix in the house without headphones on, which is bad for me because then I have to have it like directly fed into my brain. But they are audiovisual sensory nightmares. And I can't tell if they're designed to be good or playable. I will say of Night at the Gates of Hell, it's the most playable one of these games to date. I actually beat this one. And I'm glad I did, because it unlocked the other one. So it is first person, a horror game, a zombie game. It's inspired by the Italian director whose surname begins with an F, whose name I forget. Fulci. There we are. I kept wanting to say... I kept saying... In my head, I kept thinking, Fulci. Wait, no. That's that doctor. Wait, no, that's Fauci.
That's Fauci.
Yeah. Fulci, who...
Hang on. Has everyone seen Fauci and Lucio Fulci in the same place at the same time? Do we know they're not the same person?
Both of them are very interested in epidemics. Food for thought.
A lot of people are saying... Go ahead.
So, Night at the Gates of Hell, in its descriptions on store pages, like, it name checks Fulci. It makes no bones about it. Zombie 2, of course, possibly Fulci's most famous film, is directly name checked. I think in game as well, like, as it starts, it's like telling you straight up, like, yeah, we made this game to be like Zombie 2. To the point where there is a sequence that is deliberately recreated, and it's one of the two famous ones. Not the shark, although there is a killer shark in it. It's not the one where the zombie fights the shark, it's the other one. And if you've ever seen Zombie 2, or if you've ever seen a clip of it, you probably know what I mean. It involves an eye and a bit of wood. And they recreate that. It's, like all the others, full of screeching and eye-searing colours, which has not helped my week-long migraine. It is bizarre. But mechanically, one of the most straightforward of their games. You go through levels, finding keys, opening doors, all that shit. Zombies come at you, and unlike any of the other games I've played, you can actually fight them this time. You get knives that are a bit like Resident Evil, like the modern ones. So if a zombie gets you, if you've got a knife, you can kill it by like instantly stabbing it. You get access to a gun or a shotgun. Headshots are the only way to kill them. Everything goes down in one hit, but it's got to be in the head. And you aim without a reticle, which is actually okay in this game. For the most part, zombies move slowly enough that you can get a good bead on them. All of them are gross and disgusting, and the ugly graphics actually enhance that. There's one where they clearly just like cobbled together a 3D model, then took a JPEG of some maggots and just like skinned it. And it's as cheap as it is, it's still gross, especially with the sound effects. They're so horribly gurgly. Unlike the other games, if you die, you don't like waste all your fucking time and start again. It'll reload an area, often with the zombies that were there that you already killed, already dead. So it's way more forgiving. And that's good, because there are moments where, like, aiming is very slow, you can't move when you aim, and if there's, like, one zombie after another, and they're close to each other, and you don't have knives, one of them will munch you, and you're done. Some of the stuff in this game, I mean, there's a child with the face of an old man, and the first thing he says to you is, you better not be looking at his mum's beautiful boobies. And later on, when his mum's dead, and there's a corpse, and he's with it, and oh dear. There is some low poly nudity, and I mean utter fucking like very bizarre dialogue. It's very bizarre, but very memorable, and it is a shit game, but I really liked it. Unlike any of the other games which I have tried to like, because there's clearly something to them, this game is ugly and distressing on a sensory level. The writing toes the line between the puerile and the baffling, and I was glued to it. Fascinating. And then I unlocked Then I unlocked a game that, and I'm not exaggerating, could easily be a bit on Boston's Favourite Son. Easily. It's called, and again, I want this listed as a separate game, The Booty Creek Cheek Freak.
Yes, I've heard of this, actually. Linda and I were at one point going to seek it out to play it on stream because we've heard that it existed.
Yeah,
yes.
I'm thinking of streaming it. The Booty Creek Cheek Freak. So, sadly, the game devolves into a Slender style thing where you're running around collecting, you got to collect 6 bones. And I stopped playing when I collected 6 bones, got to the toilet to flush them down it, and the moment I got near the toilet, I was suddenly caught and killed and had to do it again. I was like, I'm done.
This is basically then just a first-person remake of the classic LJN published Nightmare on Elm Street game for NES.
I mean, sort of. Yeah, I know the one you mean.
Which I think Rare made that.
I'm not entirely sure that game started the way this one does, with a naked, hairy guy out in the woods with his camp friend. Plenty of homoeroticism going on. He asks him to get the thing from the car, and you never know what that thing is. You're never told. The protagonist just mentions that it is long and thick, and he wasn't sure he'd get his hands around it. An old man appears out of nowhere, who I believe at this point is also half naked, and he explains to them the legend of this woods. The legend of the Booty Creek Cheek Freak. Who was a man once, a living man, with a honking great dump truck, who sat on the public bathroom that's out in the woods, and his cheeks were so fat and juicy they got caught. And they got stuck, and he got trapped on the toilet and starved to death. And legend goes that if you take a shit on the floor of that bathroom, he'll come back and cut your ass off. and the trouble starts when the protagonist needs a shit. And you go to the bathroom. You go to the bathroom. You find the toilet, you sit on the bowl and do it. Then get a shot of the poo just on the floor. And he goes, oh no, I shit on the floor. And then a man with an ass for a head and big sharp teeth looks through the window and just says, "Gimme them cheeks, boy."
Oh my God. Oh my God. Has someone been listening to our show?
And I was like, there needs to be a movie and it needs to star Willem Dafoe. It is glorious. Then you play the game after that, and it's not as good, because it's Slender. The mechanic where you have to pick up air fresheners because there's a decreasing smell cover meter. The system is rubbish. But the conceit is that you need the air fresheners to hide it. Hide your musk because the Booty Creek Cheek Freak can smell your ass. and occasionally you fart. And I think the fart temporarily gives the game away, I think. I'm not entirely sure. And you've just got to watch out. Because he is still roaming the halls. Right. And the telltale is just... like that, he's just sniffing for Uranus.
Oh my God.
It's the Booty Creek Cheek Freak.
That's amazing.
That sure is something.
There's another extra as well, the House of Dr. Fleshenstein or something, and that's just a horde mode. It's very similar to Call of Duty Zombies or something. But yeah, this is the first Puppet Combo game where I played it all the way through. I was transfixed. I am tempted to reinstall Nun Massacre or whatever it was called. I did... Oh, what's the one? It was released a couple months ago. It was released before this one. Home something. But that's the one I think that got quite famous. Where you're basically like, there's a masked killer and you're hiding from him in a house. And it's got a real mood.
Is it simply called Murder House?
It might simply be called Murder House. Like, all of these things, all of these games they make are like doing their best to really evoke B-movie horrors and like proper like exploitation B-movie horrors. And it's a team that's done their homework. Like, they clearly fucking love those films. And I love those films. So I think that's why I've always tried to play them. And Night at the Gates of Hell, I think, nails it. It is playable enough to where I could enjoy it, and has so much fucking weirdness. And I played with all the filters on because I'm going to do a review and I wanted the default sort of visuals. You can turn them off, but it's just fascinating. Or in terms of the visuals, the audio, the bizarre writing, the disgusting visuals and concepts and conceits. It is an exploitation movie made into a game as best they can, and I think that's part of the reason why the graphics look so shit and why it's cheaply cobbled together, is because that's the video game equivalent of shitty props in one of these films. And I've played many games that are bad on purpose and they're just fucking bad, but this one hits that spot where it is bad on purpose but still enjoyable and has a real charm to it, because it's not just made by people who can't make a game so thought they'd make a shit one and call it deliberate. It's clear these developers have chops. Like, they do know what they're doing, and I think that's the differentiator. So as unbearable as I've found some of their stuff before, I sort of almost would recommend it to a very... Basically, the score I'm going to give it when I review it, I imagine, is going to be very conditional, and it's only going to be relevant to a particular type of person. But that person is... There are people who are going to fucking love this game, and they won't entirely be wrong. So yeah, Night at the Gates of Hell, do not let the cover art fool you, because it is the kind of hand-drawn, shitty cover art that, like, genuinely disgusts me when I see it, in terms of just how shitty it looks. But behind that is a game I won't forget in a hurry. Yeah.
Right, shall we talk about the news bits we got to talk about? Because there's a couple of them this week, and in particular there's one story. For anyone who's unaware, Unity has destroyed their entire reputation in about 30 seconds. I don't even know where to jump in on this. The short version, Unity has decided that they want to charge developers a fee every single time someone installs their game. Not every time someone purchases it, every time someone installs it. This was announced as coming into effect on January 1st of next year. It is the Unity Runtime Fee will be charged to any game that has passed a revenue threshold in the past year and a lifetime install count. There's a lot of bullshit this spirals into. Do you want to take this over, Conrad?
Well, a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I've had some thoughts about this and been looking at it, but yeah, it's so the way that they have structured this is based on your Unity subscription. There are differing thresholds and charges for each of these runtime installations. At the free level and the first paid tier, this is 200,000 total downloads and $200,000 in sales in the last 12 months. And after that point, they are charging 20 cents an installation.
Yes.
Which is...
There's a lot of problems with that.
Oh, I mean, my first thought was, consider being an independent, like a tiny one-person developer who makes a game and against all of the odds, it goes viral and becomes a huge thing, and you were selling it for $1. And then all of a sudden, as soon as you have made $200,000 on it, well, and technically if you release it on Steam, like, let's be honest, $140,000 on it. Now suddenly you're going to lose another 20% of your revenue before tax on everything that sells, unless you pay $5,000 to Unity to upgrade your subscription.
As people have pointed out, like, there's a lot of use cases where it's making a lot of use cases for games developed in Unity just not make sense anymore. Demos are now a risk for developers to offer. DRM-free versions of their games are risky, including your game in a charity bundle, which we'll get to it. Unity says that it won't count if someone gets your game from a charity bundle, but also
How will they know?
Unity developers are acknowledging openly they have no fucking way to know. But charity bundles are a risk. Code giveaways are a risk, including your Unity developed game on Game Pass, because they consider installations regardless of whether they were purchased. They consider streamed plays, so like if you have your game embedded in a browser and someone plays it, that counts as an installation. Multi-device users are risky to developers. Unity has said outright, if you own a PC and a Steam Deck and you purchase a game and you install it on both devices, that will count as 2 installs and the developer will get charged twice. If you offer an update post-release to your game and someone had uninstalled your game to make space and now, there's an update, I should reinstall it, the developer's gonna get charged again because you installed it again.
So this is bad for, like, the, as I mentioned, that tiny developer. And there aren't going to be a lot of those. But where this is really going to hurt are the low mid-level publishers who are already struggling. We've seen recently both Tiny Build and Devolver have pretty disappointing quarters. A lot of that attributed to game subscription services like Game Pass and PlayStation Plus no longer giving the payouts that were anticipated.
Devolver have actively made a note since this news of going, if you're pitching games to us, you need to tell us what engine you're developing it in.
Yeah.
Specifically going, if you're developing in Unity, fucking let us know, because we don't want to be involved.
Yeah, that's, and I can't blame them, because, imagine being in their position. I don't know how many games they currently have under contract for publication, but they made a lot of calculations based on revenue models that have suddenly changed dramatically.
I can point you at one example. The developers of Cult of the Lamb. They did a joking tweet going, look forward to Cult of the Lamb not being on sale from January 1st. But then they did a post that was a bit more serious where they were like, we had games in development for Unity. We had been pitching games to publishers we were working on in Unity. Unity is what we know. Mm-hmm. And suddenly we're realizing we're going to have to throw away the engine experience we have and learn a new engine before starting from scratch on pitching these projects to publishers. We are looking at probably multiple years of delay on us producing any new games because of this news, because of how much it fucks up our budgeting.
Right, yeah, imagine being a developer who's 2 to 3 years in on a project in Unity that suddenly has this hit. Where do you go? What do you do? Do you finish?
Yeah. And one point that I think was well put by there was a tweet that's doing the round from Rami Ismail, I think, that was let me find it. Fun thought experiment with Unity's new pricing model. If you made a game that reached $200,000 in revenue at a 50-50 publisher split, and you decided to support, for example, the charity bundle for racial justice, you would end up, under Unity's new model, $60,000 in debt.
Yep.
For offering your game in that charity bundle.
Yep. Another point that I think is really worth noting, and setting aside that this is it's not a strange move. This goes back to the enshittification principle, which I've brought up in recent weeks. They brought people into the ecosystem by offering all of the goodies. They started then offering, taking things away from the base level user to make them available to paid users, and now they're fucking the paid users. This is how it works. But I think it is for an engine like Unity that really has built its back on being openly available and largely freely available for people to introduce themselves into the industry. I think it's going to have a real chilling effect on them. But you know who's not going to be hurt by this? The large publishers.
Yeah.
At the highest levels of this, it's not to say that the percentages are negligible, but for full retail games running Unity, not a problem. AAA games running Unity, not going to be an issue. They'll be able to factor these costs in.
This is always the fucking way.
Yes.
Yeah, always the fucking way. Like, the big... we take this right to its highest level with taxes and the mega rich, who are never impacted by that. Or, like, speeding fines, where a rich person, it's nothing to them. It's not a punishment. There's no punishment for speeding. In America, in Britain, you can risk having your license taken away at least. But in America, no real punishment for reckless driving for the rich. As I've seen pointed out, it's an old sort of saying, a punishment that only impacts the poor isn't a punishment, except a punishment for being poor. And this is what we're seeing here. This is a fine for being small, because for a big publisher, it's no fine at all.
Yeah, you're 100% correct there. And I view this as an anti-competitive action industry-wide. By taking this step, they have made it that much harder for any developer that is trying to enter this business to do so. And that is inherently to the benefit of the larger entities that exist within the space. So,
yeah. There is another aspect of this that has been being discussed, and I think it's important to acknowledge, is the ability to maliciously manipulate this. And Unity will say, we've got, we're developing AI safeguards to detect malicious stuff, blah, 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 proprietary, whatever nonsense.
That's always for your own good.
Yeah, but the point that a lot of people have made is, we know for a fact that installing the same game on multiple devices that a user owns will charge a developer multiple times. If a person purchases a cheap game that's a couple of quid and goes, there's a trans in it, there's a disabled person in it, and I don't like that, I'm gonna refund it or whatever, but before I do, I'm going to install it on every machine in my house so that I charge that developer hopefully more money than I paid, and then refund it, so I've taken money out of the developer's pocket twice.
Yeah, no, this can absolutely be weaponized.
Yeah, someone is going to find a way to, set up a series of rolling virtual machines that create a new virtual machine, install the game, new virtual machine, install the game. People will find a way to manipulate this to target minority creators and financially devastate them. It's a matter of time before someone does it.
Yep. And that's... I wish I could say that sounded like unrealistic doomsaying, but you are 100% correct.
Yeah. Also, fun fact, look, I can't legally prove this, but I can say it sure seems, in my opinion, likely that there was a bunch of fucking insider trading going on at Unity in the days running up to this announcement coming.
No.
What? I know, shocking.
We need to point out that John Riccatello's in charge of this shit. Someone reminded me of that, because in response to this, they posted an old creepy Photoshop I made of him.
Well, it's funny you mentioned John Riccatello. He's one of the people who might have been insider trading a little bit, maybe.
What?
Oh, you don't say.
Reading from Eurogamer, Unity executives sold thousands of shares in the weeks leading up to last night's hugely controversial announcement it will be charging developers when their game is installed. John Riccatello shifted 2,000 shares last week on September 6th, which is part of a wider trend over the past year where he has sold more than 50,000 shares in total and bought none. Several other Unity board members also sold shares in the last couple of weeks, including President of Growth, Toma Barzeev, who sold 37,500 shares on September 1st for around $1.4 million, and Shlomo Devrat, who sold 68,000 shares on August 30th for around $2.5 million.
Dodgy pricks.
That's a lot of people selling, like, at the end of August, beginning of September, about a week or two ago, selling between $1.5 and $2.5 million in shares right before a potentially devastating announcement that was going to hugely impact public perception of the company.
Yeah, that definitely seems like something the Security and Exchange Commission will want to take a look at.
I cannot prove that they were insider trading, but if I was someone whose job was to investigate insider trading, I'd go have a sniff around there, I think.
Yeah, that is definitely suspicious as fuck.
Just a tad, right?
Oh, God.
So yeah, this... over the last, 24 hours since this was announced, Unity has kept trying to clarify or roll things back, and it's not fundamentally fixing the problem. So I'll read from Axios. Unity told Axios last night that it had regrouped to further discuss some of the issues raised by game developers. They say that they will only charge after a user first installs a game, not on future installs. They have not suggested how they would know if it was a first install or not. But they're like, no, this will stop players install bombing a game. But, again, people have pointed out, you've said that, installs on new devices will still count, so there's still going to be ways to install the bomb. Another point raised was that this could severely impact studios who've released their games onto services like Xbox Game Pass. Unity has now said download fees would be charged by Unity to subscription service owners, so Microsoft in the case of Game Pass, which doesn't change the end result. What it says is, we're not going to see Unity games on services like Game Pass because someone's going to have to pay a fee every time they're downloaded, and that's not a good deal. So, the end result's not going to be any different, really, there. They can't seem to decide on these things. Some of the confusion going around is whoever owns the license for the 3D, the Unity 3D version will foot the bill, which has pointed out that, porting studios that haven't made their own game and aren't making money on every copy sold, but are being paid a lump sum to port a game into onto a new platform, might be the ones who have to pay the ongoing fees for copies sold, because they're the ones that had the copy of Unity. A Unity spokesperson, Mark Whitten, said he estimated only 10% of developers using the engine would be hit. So that's alright, I guess, then. Only 10% of people making games in Unity are going to be impacted.
I want to know the source of that number of users. The total number of users. Is that, I don't know, everybody who's ever installed Unity lifetime? Everybody that has a Unity subscription? Everybody that's made an account at Unity? What the fuck does that mean?
Yeah, that figure means fucking nothing, right?
10% of that number could be very, 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 very big.
Yeah.
Fucking ridiculous.
They've tried to defend it by saying a large majority of Unity editor users are currently not paying anything and will not be affected by this change.
Yes, because they installed it, tinkered around for 30 seconds at most, and then closed it and never opened it again. It's not...
Yeah.
Oh.
The developers who will be impacted are generally those who have successful games and are generating revenue way above the thresholds we outlined in our blog.
For fuck's sake, just pull my third leg.
This means that developers who are still building their businesses and growing their audience of their games will not pay a fee. Yeah, they'll just hit a stumbling block and then suddenly be like, oh, I got too big now, all my money's gone.
Yeah, they'll be terrified of success.
Yeah. Unity has also clarified that the changes are not retroactive or perpetual, and it will only charge...
It better not be. In fact, I don't think anybody assumed that it would be, because even that, as ridiculous and bad as this idea is, and what a mess the complexity of it would be, that would be so far beyond the pale that
So they're not going to charge you for installs that happen before January 1st, 2024, but games released prior to January 2024 will be charged this fee. So if you released your game before this was announced, you have no choice but to be obligated to start paying Unity money. They're basically going, you're a trapped audience, you released a game on our platform, we can just say, you owe us money going forward now. Despite that not being something you agreed to when you made your game.
Well, they can change these agreements anytime they fucking want to, which is something else we all need to be remembering at all times. Another, just lovely uncertainty of the ground upon which we stand. I do think that, like, the impact on games that are, more than 6 months old will probably be pretty insignificant, but I do think that in terms of number of installs over a year, the risk of that is pretty low unless it's intentional. Specifically to target someone. It will be harder to hit that threshold. Because if you've made that kind of money, you've probably paid for a Unity subscription.
Concerns people have is, like, how is this being recorded by Unity? Because, like, a big question some people have been bringing up is, pirated copies, are they going to show up as an install?
This was a thought that I had very early on as well, and no, I don't think they will, and here's why. The cracking scene loves the developers, by and large. For them, it is a matter of principle that this stuff is DRM locked, and they want to share games. They still want people to buy games, because if games are not bought under our system, there will be no games for them to crack and enjoy. Also, they will block this. They will find a way to prevent Unity from knowing these installs came off of their pirated release.
I think going forward you will see that happen. If there is... I don't know what the scene is in terms of, like, currently out there Unity games that people have cracked. Have they bothered to remove whatever this is?
Probably not prevented a runtime check to Unity. I would assume not, because that wouldn't inhibit the functioning of the game to have that in there, but they will be looking for it now.
Yeah, well, my point being, let's say Cult of the Lamb, for example, a game that's already out that we know is, like, their devs are concerned about this. Let's say they did pull it off sale on January 1st. I know that that's not a serious thing they're suggesting. It seems like it's a joke. But let's say they did. And then some big streamer did a playthrough of it and a bunch of people went, oh shit, that does look like a cool game. Can't get it anywhere. I'll go pirate it. And Unity recognizes those pirated installations as installations, and despite having pulled their game off sale, they are still getting charged for a wave of installs. Like, that is not a ridiculous hypothetical.
No. And there are ways that, like, the piracy scene can address that on some level, but, like, they can do a repack of it and try to get that to the top of the torrent list, but it would be hard. And it would, we can't rely on that.
There are developers who've made Unity games who are doing tweet threads at the moment going, I might just push an update to my game that blocks it communicating with Unity. Like, what if I just quietly push an update where Unity just...
That would be a violation of their terms of service agreement with Unity, almost certainly.
It sure would be, but I think, honestly, my gut says, Unity doesn't fucking care if people don't like them. Is there room for a mass boycott by developers where they just go, cool, en masse, we are going to stop our games communicating with Unity? It feels like that's the kind of shit that's needed.
I think if enough prominent people who are able and willing to stand up to this do, like, it's the people who are most capable of standing up to this that have no incentive to do so.
Yeah.
That's a huge problem. But if Unity were to learn that developers were doing this, they would have to pursue some sort of action. and it would lead to lawsuits, and that would lead to government intervention inherently, because once it goes through the court system, now we've got some precedent in contract law and so forth. There's a lot of ways this can blow up, and it's going to be a very, very interesting year for Unity, I think.
It is. There are a lot of game development engines that are certainly jumping on this opportunity to go, hey, we're going to start putting together resources if you are used to developing in Unity or have a project halfway done in Unity on what you can do to move over to our engine. I've seen a lot of developers saying, even if this all gets rolled back, you have permanently hurt trust. Unity's reputation is going to have an incredibly hard time recovering from this.
Mm-hmm.
They have shot themselves in the foot long term.
And it took so long for them to develop goodwill. Like, you remember what a bad reputation Unity had as an engine forever and ever?
The one time I interviewed John Riccatello, it was specifically to talk to him about, hey, do you think the fact that the only games that say made in Unity when booted up are cheap games from inexperienced developers hurts the reputation of your engine? Like, that's the point we were at with talking about Unity at one point was, people only think of, like, the worst farmed out games as being Unity games because they're the games that you enforce sticking your logo on. Like, they've done so much work to fix that reputation just to throw it in the trash.
Yep, pretty amazing.
We had a couple of very quick bits of news to finish up with. In a thing that feels like parody when you read it, official Xbox credit cards will soon be a thing in the US.
Everybody else has one.
I had a PlayStation credit card, like, about 10 or so years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember how I got it. Like, I don't remember how it came into my possession, but at one point, a long, long time ago, yeah. You can get credit cards for fucking anything, that's the thing.
Yeah, build up your credit card debt in order to accrue points you can spend on games and add-ons via Xbox.com.
Lovely stuff.
Get 3 months of free Xbox Game Pass Ultimate for getting a credit card.
I think I actually did get some Sony, like, electronic shit off that credit card at one point.
Yeah.
Like, these point reward programs can be of benefit if, you know, they're managed correctly, but it's not, the vast majority of people will just wind up spending a shit ton of money and going into debt.
The way I will put it is I don't think any video game company that releases their own software that contains loot box microtransactions should be allowed to also offer a credit card.
No, you've not proven yourself financially responsible.
And the last story we've got this week is, we've got another update on the slow, perpetual death of E3. So you know how E3 2023 didn't happen?
I do remember that didn't happen.
Yeah, this was meant to be the first year that after they'd been purchased. You remember back in 2022, ReedPop purchased E3, the group that owns, like, the PAX conventions and EGX here in the UK. They purchased it back in 2022, and they were going to be in charge of it.
Did they purchase it, or did they, get the contract to run it?
Well, they were going to be the production company behind E3. I can see that much. They were going to be in charge of putting on E3 2023. They are no longer involved in E3. They've stepped away. It has been confirmed by the ESA that there is no organizer or location to hold E3 2024.
I mean, this makes total sense. ReedPop is they're an organization that does consumer shows.
Yeah, but that was the direction the ESA was trying to push E3.
But there's not going to be anybody there to attract the consumers. Everybody's gone. Without the draw of the major publishers and console manufacturers, there's not going to be any traction. I mean, for fuck's sake, Penny Arcade Expo still gets Gabe and Tycho to trot themselves out to these things.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You know, if Gabe and Tycho stopped showing up, we would see a drop off of PAX attendance.
Yeah.
Weirdly.
Having a look at this, ReedPop has said it will not work on future iterations of E3. The ESA has also informed the LA Convention Center that it will not turn up there in 2024, although, according to GamesIndustry.biz, it understands that the ESA is looking to 2025 for a complete reinvention of the show.
Another one?
Yeah, another one! So that'll be, 6 years between the last E3 and definitely the reinvention that's definitely going to happen this time.
And they've had so many. Like, I still remember that one in, 2006? Where they tried to make it, like, they took all the expo bit out of it and everyone was taking shuttles to different places and it was boring as fuck.
I must say, of all those kind of events, like, for all the problems with Gamescom, at the very least they do a really good job of, like, here is the business area that's just for business and, like, is fairly limited on who is in there, and you just show up for your appointment at your numerically found booth, and you do your appointment and you're done. It's nowhere near trying to do, like, the public is here and celebrities are here and there's flashing lights everywhere and I have to do my work in the middle of that.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, E3 is not having a good time, but fingers crossed for 2025, I guess. Good luck, then. It's dead.
Yeah.
But yeah, there you go. That's it. We just about kept us under 2 hours.
Well, E3 may be dead, but what isn't dead is Laura Kate Dale's career, which is alive and well, brimming, vital. In fact, maybe you could tell my listeners about it. Strength to strength.
Oh, well, you can find the stuff I'm doing at Laura K. Buzz pretty much everywhere. Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, TikTok, Patreon. That's the one that pays the bills as little as $1 a month over on patreon.com/Laura K. Buzz really helps. Mastodon, Blue Sky, all the things. Laura K. Buzz. This Friday, or it might go up a day early. It might be it might be up by the time you hear this. There's an episode of Accessibility going up about the recently more common trend of pay a premium price to get access to the game 5 days early, and the accessibility concerns that surround that range from the obvious of weaponizing FOMO, which particularly impacts people who are, struggle a little more with impulse control, but sort of ranging through to things like how that intersects with people's ability to access information about accessibility in that weird 5-day window where the game's technically not released yet. Look forward to that. I'm really proud of that video. Just Laura K. Buzz. You'll find all my stuff everywhere. What about you, Conrad?
Well, you can find me at Conrad Zimmerman on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky. You can hang out with me on Twitch at twitch.tv/thatconradzimmerman, where I'm gonna be doing some of the painting on stream, because that just seems like a good pair of activities to do together. You can hear me talking about snacks on Let's Talk About Snacks wherever podcasts are available. And go check out Red Planet. It's a live stream and podcast that I produce with 4 lovely people who all want to make the world a better place, and that's what it's all about. We just had a conversation with Nick Estes, who is an indigenous activist here in the United States, talking about the case of Leonard Peltier, who is he's the longest held political prisoner in the United States. Interesting story, really, really good episode. You can buy anti-capitalist propaganda and official Jimquisition merchandise at mercenarycreative.com. And everything I do online gets supported through Patreon at patreon.com/fistshark. And you know who else has a Patreon?
Who?
James Stephanie Sterling.
Oh, that is correct. Patreon, I don't know why I was so Tory about that. Yes, that is correct. Yes. Patreon.com/Jimquisition. That's that. Not streamed in quite some time because I haven't been able to. But when I do, it'll be at Twitch TV/Jim Sterling. My upcoming wrestling dates are September 25th and Sheffield. That's PPW. That's my training school's first ever public grown-up show, First Pursuit, Sheffield, September 25th. My next date after that is October 10th, and that is in Manchester. That'll be the next Sovereign Pro Wrestling show. Just sort of Google First Pursuit Pro Wrestling and Sovereign Pro, or at Sov Pro, for those details. Thank you all so much. We will be with you next week. Bye.
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 Bye. So I went all weird then. Bye. There we are. Nailed it. That does sound like a man.